At 0857, just outside the Balashika military district, morning stillness fractured. Ukrainian F-16s came in low at 200 feet, flares trailing like white comets, while Neptune missiles arced in from nearly 100 miles away. Recon drones scrambled Russian radars, and Leopard UGVs crept toward fortified bunkers. It was not a warning shot. It was a full-spectrum breach aimed at Moscow's eastern gate. Within moments, command centers burned, fuel depots detonated, and air defenses blinked offline.
The aerial barrage opened space for the ground drive. PT-91 tanks rolled in from the southeast, engines grumbling through industrial ruins. At their flanks moved Leopard ground robots, compact UGVs with mine sensors and signal jammers. They disrupted sensor nets, sniffed out buried explosives, and fed fire coordinates back to rocket artillery waiting behind the line. Infantry flowed through maintenance corridors and shattered walkways, using FPV drones to peer around every corner and to mark choke points. The assault moved like a surgeon's blade, quiet, deliberate, and precise. Russian response was instant and brutal. T-80BV tanks and MTLB transports poured from northern alleys, throwing overlapping fields of fire between warehouses and cramped housing blocks. Urban geometry favored weight and numbers on paper, but the fight in the streets favored speed and adaptation. Ukrainian loitering munitions, guided by heat and motion, dove between buildings to strike relay trucks and relay nodes, shredding command cohesion. Close-quarters fights erupted. Shells ricocheted off rough concrete, drone motors screamed overhead, and every intersection became a micro-battlefield. Where the Russians sought to blunt the advance with brute force, Ukraine turned the city into a knife fight and dictated the timing. At 0932, Ukrainian armor and UGVs pushed deeper into Balashika's outskirts. Russia launched a counterpunch, a pair of Mi-35M gunships with Su-25 strike support streaming from a nearby base. They dove low and hard toward the spearhead near a ruined tram depot, intent on shredding the PT-91s. But the newly deployed Iris TLS detection array had eyes. Recon drones had eyes. 2 missiles rose and found the incoming rotors. In under 90 seconds, both gunships cartwheeled into the tree line in flames. The regional sky, already crowded, convulsed. The surviving Su-25s hugged treetops and roofs, trying to thread corridors that radar couldn't see. They met F-16s circling at altitude, AIM-120s reaching beyond visual range. One Russian jet peeled off, flares blooming, while another took a direct hit and spun into a warehouse district. The afternoon sky over Balashika became layered. Low scouts skimming rooflines, interceptors high and patient, jets screaming through the middle. It became a three-dimensional slaughterhouse, brutal, fast, decisive. With every downed chopper and aborted sortie, Ukraine tightened its dome of air denial over the corridor. Even so, the ground fight hardened. From the west, 2 S-3 Akatsiya howitzers and BM-30 Smerch batteries laid down thunderous barrages to crack Ukrainian logistics. The first salvos cratered roads and overturned supply trucks. A mobile Ukrainian EW unit burned near a refuel point. A steel and flame wall threatened to freeze Ukrainian momentum, but the battle had become algorithmic. Eyes in the sky fed digits and geometry to guns on the ground. Recon drones with thermal optics tracked launch arcs, triangulated plume signatures, and painted battery positions. Counter-battery doctrine executed in minutes. RM-70 Vampire systems outside rocket range launched coordinated 122mm salvos, while kamikaze J-22 drones threaded through smoke to strike command nodes. Within 7 minutes, 2 artillery teams were wrecked, ammunition cooking off, launchers burning. The rear fire screen collapsed, supply corridors unclogged. Ukraine's tempo accelerated. With artillery suppressed, Ukraine aimed for the nerve center, a suspected Russian command post concealed beneath Building 8 in the urban core. Rather than a broad infantry hammer, they opted for precision, Under smoke and ECM cover, a small special operations team infiltrated through drainage culverts and service stairwells. Tiny bird-sized drones slipped through windows and vents, feeding thermal maps to handsets. Robotic demolition units, four-wheeled bots carrying shaped charges, rolled into position. At 10:41 a.m., controlled explosions collapsed key sublevels. The structure above remained standing, but the underground nodes, encrypted racks, relay boxes, and radio cores were crushed. Communications in the sector went dark, vehicles repositioned without orders. In a quarter of an hour, the enemy's nerve was severed. The Russian reaction from the north was predictable and furious. Concealed staging zones 6 miles north disgorged a column of T-80Bs and towed artillery in a broad pincer aimed to split the Ukrainian axis. Their plan? Push hard while Kyiv consolidated gains. But the Ukrainians had set traps. FPV teams ran ultra-low approaches, 10 to 15 feet off the ground, popping up to hammer lead vehicles before they reached intersections. 3 Russian tanks were disabled before they reached the outer ring. Those that advanced ran into a triangle clamp tactic, ambush fires from perpendicular alley cuts, while infantry with ATGMs punished exposed flanks. An attempted flank through an industrial lot hit UGV-laid minefields and gridlocked the column. Helicopter support faltered under persistent EW interference, and by the time air cover engaged, Iris-T batteries had already shot down a chopper and forced another to abort. In less than 30 minutes, the northern push collapsed into retreat. Abandoned tanks smoked in the streets, trucks burned, and infantry scattered. Ukraine had not only blunted the counterattack, it had absorbed and turned it into a killing zone. The initiative slipped from Moscow's grasp. As Russian forces attempted to fall back, Ukraine tightened the net. Buval and Banshee EW vehicles moved into pre-planned jamming positions and severed outbound Russian comms. Radio, satellite, encrypted relays, all fell into silence. Neptune drones performed deception loops along retreat axes, spoofing radar returns and creating the illusion of armor where none existed. In the confusion, friendly fire incidents occurred. Russian crews fired on their own convoys, mistaking them for UAVs. From rooftops and stairwells, Ukrainian squads established overwatch on the M7 highway, building kill zones. Snipers and grenade teams picked off exposed crews. What had begun as an orderly withdrawal became a rout. By mid-morning, Balashika's northern approaches were littered with wreckage. The eastern gate had been torn open. Air defense grids were fragmented, command nodes severed, and retreat corridors choked. For a time, Moscow's layered defense looked obsolete against a fusion of drones, UGVs, EW, and precise strike. Yet amid ruin, there were moments of mercy. A medevac Leopard robot emerged from collapsed concrete, carrying a wounded Russian soldier. Machine and man retreated shoulder to shoulder across broken ground. At 0342, in thick pines west of Kuga, obscure scenes unfolded as another operation threaded its needle. 24 loitering munitions and 6 Vela-R rockets screamed from 50 miles out, while Su-27s and MiG-29s cut across the sky. The target? A satellite relay and uplink station whose silence would blind Russian long-range coordination from Donetsk to Bryansk. The first explosions rocked the compound and a second wave followed. Not blunt, but deceptive. High-altitude recon drones mapped radar nodes, while mobile EW trucks 10 miles back flooded L-band and C-band frequencies, ripping guidance links into static. Kuga's uplink chatter dissolved into noise. On the ground, autonomous six-wheeled mine-laying platforms seeped along trails, emplacing shaped charges to make any reinforcement a lethal gamble. Russia's Tor M2 and Pantsir S1 batteries screeched into action and fired wildly at phantom contacts, fed by decoys. Their missiles lit the sky and revealed their positions. Hidden in a tree hollow near Pochino, a pre-positioned BM-30 crew squeezed launch triggers on 6 Vela M rockets aimed at the complex. Launches flashed like meteors. A counter-battery Zoop-negative radar north of the line detected thermal signatures and relayed the coordinates. Smerch rockets splashed back, but the Ukrainian team had already faded down pre-planned exit lanes. Their launcher swung and fled before the return fire landed. Timing was merciless. Shrapnel punched foliage 1,000 feet from the exfil route. Kuga's inner ring came alive. Tor M2 radars and Pantsir units engaged. Interceptors climbed and detonated on approach. But the Vela M missile envelope was designed for chaos. Evasive flight profiles, minor course shifts to throw off intercept solutions, and high speed to outrun analog guns. Out of 6, 4 missiles broke through. They ripped through the satellite dome and burst into the command bunker. Antenna farms collapsed, backup power fried. Within minutes, the relay station's uplink died, and long-range artillery missions across a wide front froze. Ukraine's 6-phase assault, decoys, missiles, robots, drones, jammers, and precision strikes, had collapsed a critical node in under 40 minutes. As the dust of Kuga settled, Ukrainian ground teams flowed in to secure and to extract intelligence. Robotic units disabled remaining comms, planted EMPs, and forced surviving defenders to abandon gear. Drone cameras circled above the smoking ruins, while crews collected drives, nodes, and encryption modules for analysis. The tactical effect was immediate. Long-range Russian fires fell silent and reverted to backup nets. Strategically, a deep seam in the Russian logistics tapestry had been cut. Across the theater, the fighting converged into a single harsh logic. The side that sees first and who can turn that sight into algorithmic action wins the opening salvo. Eyes in the sky guided steel on target. Low-signature drones and crawling robots rewired the battlefield geometry. EW made old counters pointless. Technology and timing, not numbers alone, now decided who held ground. By late morning, Balashika was a ruin ringed by smoke and motion. Ukrainian units consolidated perimeters, recoveries began on captured vehicles, and medics moved through the wreckage carrying the wounded, friend and foe alike. Command still hummed in field tablets and encrypted links, not through hulks of centralized nodes, but through distributed mesh. A new kind of warfare stitched together by many small, fast threads, rather than by a few heavy anchors.
Part 1 ends with Balashika's industrial spine fractured and the city's eastern gate effectively neutralized. The enemy's counterpunch was blunted. Command nodes were severed, and the corridor, once defended by layered air defenses, now sat vulnerable beneath Ukraine's dome of sensors and strike. The field was won, but the war would continue. Part 2 will carry the final ripples, deeper strikes, the unfolding strategic fallout, and the human toll that runs through every victory. As the northern front burned and tank wreckage smoldered across half a mile of forest, North Korea escalated, vertically and electronically. At 4:47 a.m., they unleashed a salvo of short-range KN-02 ballistic missiles, each capable of striking targets up to 75 miles away. These missiles carried radar-homing seekers meant to annihilate Ukraine's command vehicles and radar stations near the depot.
Ukraine's response came instantly. Patriot PAC-3 batteries went live, tracking the missiles with precision fire control radars positioned on elevated ground. Within moments, 6 interceptors roared upward, each one slicing through the sky at Mach 4.5. 5 out of 7 incoming missiles exploded mid-flight in blinding white flashes that painted the clouds. Meanwhile, KAC-2M electronic warfare vehicles pulsed waves of interference, corrupting the guidance systems of the 2 remaining missiles. One veered off course and detonated harmlessly in a barren field. But North Korea wasn't done. From the west, 3 Mi-24 Hind helicopters flew dangerously low, hugging ridgelines to evade radar. They roared in at 150 knots, unleashing S-8 unguided rockets and a torrent of .50 caliber gunfire on a North Korean resupply convoy. Fuel trucks and mobile radar platforms exploded in a chain of infernos, sending pillars of black smoke into the forest canopy. Overhead, Punisher and Beaver drones loitered silently before diving straight into enemy rocket artillery positions, their payloads detonating with surgical precision. Ukrainian EW teams maintained steady uplinks, battling signal jammers as both sides fought for control over the invisible spectrum. This was no longer just a war of firepower. It was a war of signals, deception, and dominance. Radar hunted radar. Jammers dueled like boxers. The airspace over Luhansk became an unseen storm of digital warfare, humming, screaming, pulsing with raw electronic aggression. By 7:44 p.m., the skies finally grew quiet. The chaos faded into a low-band hum, but silence in Luhansk never meant peace. Under the cover of dusk, 2 North Korean Special Forces platoons, roughly 60 elite operators, slipped through the southern tree line, barely 900 feet from the munitions depot. They were equipped with miniature drones, handheld radar scopes, and IR camouflage. Moving in tight diamond formations, they crept toward the depot, intending to breach the perimeter unnoticed. But Ukraine was waiting. Motorbike troops, their helmets synced with thermal scopes and AI motion recognition, patrolled the perimeter. Riding at 40 miles per hour, they weaved through narrow forest trails, detecting every shimmer of human heat in the darkness. At the same moment, autonomous minefield grids activated. Recon robots, deployed earlier, triggered dozens of TM-62 mines in cascading arcs around the depot's southern fence. Explosions erupted like a chain of lightning. The special forces had no exit. Gunfire burst sporadically through the trees, each muzzle flash betraying another position. Ukrainian marksmen, watching from elevated blinds, fired with surgical precision. Within 12 minutes, the infiltration collapsed. Bodies were dragged back into the tree line. The depot stood untouched. The message was clear. Even in darkness, the battlefield belonged to Ukraine. By 10 p.m., North Korea's momentum had turned to desperation. Their armored columns were gone, air dominance shattered, and special forces broken. Their last lifeline, a logistics corridor northeast of the depot, kept them alive. Supplies, reinforcements, and command lines flowed through it. Ukraine decided to sever it. 2 HIMARS batteries and 3 M270 MLRS launchers received target coordinates from Punisher drones circling overhead. Within 6 minutes, 42 guided rockets streaked across the night sky. The impacts were brutal and precise. Mobile radar trailers vanished in sheets of flame. Ammunition trucks ignited mid-turn, creating 3,000-foot fireballs that lit the forest floor like daylight. The final volley obliterated a field command post, silencing its encrypted radio network within seconds. Then came the artillery. From 20 miles southwest, 155mm howitzers thundered relentlessly. Guided by spotter drones, they created a dead zone 2 miles long, a graveyard of armor and trucks. The North Korean supply chain fractured in real time. Reinforcements never arrived. Withdrawal teams were caught in indirect fire. Ukraine hadn't just stopped the offensive, it had amputated its spine. At 3:23 a.m., only hours after the last rocket fell, Ukraine struck back. 8 T-80 main battle tanks advanced in staggered formation, led by mine-clearing robots crawling ahead to carve safe paths. Motorbike infantry darted between trees, jammers slung over their backs, RPGs ready. Above them, Mi-24 gunships swept in low, launching salvos of S-8 rockets into enemy trenches.
Behind them, the sky buzzed with kamikaze drones, each locked onto pre-designated heat signatures. Within 47 minutes, the battlefield flipped. Every fortified position the North Koreans had built was gone, destroyed, or abandoned. Dozens of APCs and trucks lay flipped, burning, or shredded to pieces. But Ukraine didn't just reclaim ground. They showed restraint. Medics moved into the chaos, treating wounded Korean soldiers, wrapping them in blankets beneath a burning sky. By dawn, it was over. The Luhansk munitions depot stood once again under Ukrainian control. Over 80 enemy vehicles lay destroyed across a 2-mile radius. 5 mobile radar stations were gone. Every infiltrator neutralized or captured.
North Korea's grip on eastern Luhansk was broken. They shifted to guerrilla tactics, their heavy formations decimated. Ukraine had not only survived, but evolved, turning the night into their weapon. And as smoke rose over the depot, a final image remained. A Mi-24 gunship hovering above a field of ash, while medics kneeled below, tending to the fallen, their faces lit by the fire of both victory and grief. This battle was not just survival. It was a lesson written in smoke, a message that even amid war's darkness, humanity endures.